Well, hey, good afternoon. I guess it's evening. It's evening now. Good evening, everybody. Thanks for spending a little time with me. This is Congressman Kinzinger, and it is one of the most beautiful days ever in Illinois outside. So if you're on your cell outside, enjoy. If you're inside, I'm glad you're inside listening, and just wanted to give a call today and chat a little about what's going on. Obviously, I think there's a lot of questions about coronavirus, about some of the things in D.C. in terms of the relief package that is in the process of being negotiated, some of the questions in Illinois when it comes to school, et cetera. Let me start off, and I'm going to repeat this a lot because we're going to have people join basically over about the next 10 minutes. If you want to ask a question, hit *3. So hit *3 on your phone. That'll get you in the queue, and we'll try to get through as many questions as we can today, and hopefully we can get through quite a few. If you don't get a chance to ask your question, again, *3 if you want to. If you don't get a chance to ask, then at the end of the call, you're actually going to be able to leave a message. So you can have comments, questions, whatever. I'll hear it. I'll get back to you. And so, again, I just really appreciate this opportunity to chat with you. So *3 to get in the queue to ask a question. I'll repeat that a few more times. But a bit of a just kind of brief rundown on where we sit today. Obviously, the virus is continuing to be the virus, and we're seeing ebbs and flows all around the country. It varies every day. You know, you wake up, you hear that it's growing, and then the next day you hear it's not, the next day it is, and you know, it's a really difficult time. And I think the first thing to keep in mind, which is important, is the vast majority of people, if they get COVID-19, will be fine. You know, as we know, they may feel like they have a cold, they may not feel anything at all, which is the reason that we wear masks, and that's an important thing to do around people. But of course, as we know, there's a part of the population that's very vulnerable. We don't fully understand it. We don't fully realize necessarily, you know, why. We know some of the risk factors, but I think we're going to know a lot more as time goes. And so the bottom line is right now, I still think it's the best thing as we reopen this economy, which is extremely important, as you all know. It's important that we continue to maintain our social distance, wear masks. And in Washington, D.C., I'm in Illinois right now, but I'll be called back whenever this package is done. We want to make sure that we're giving people the tools and the financial resources they need to get through this, but also understanding that, you know, every dollar we spend that's not funded, which in this process is actually quite a few dollars, is going to have to be paid back, and paid back with interest, and probably not by us, by our kids and our grandkids. So, you know, we continue to try to find this right way to move forward, and by the way, this is all in the middle of probably one of the most divisive elections, at least since I've been alive, and maybe in a very long time. So anyway, again, *3 if you're just joining the call. If you want to ask a question, we'll get to questions here in a bit. But let me just say, on the coronavirus package, you guys, if you've been paying attention to the news on this, the $600 boost to unemployment has temporarily expired. They're negotiating through that. If I had to, you know, look in my crystal ball, which is broken a lot because I tend to predict some of these things wrong in politics, but you know, I think it's going to end up somewhere between a $0 and a $600 boost to unemployment for some time in the future, as long as this pandemic goes on to the rate it is. What we don't want to do, and this is the key, it's important to separate all of ourselves from the heated political rhetoric that we hear all the time. What we don't want to do is, A, make this permanent, right? This is not a permanent boost. And the second thing we don't want to do is just cut it off because, you know, we're concerned about the debt. I'm very concerned about the debt, but this is an important time to make sure we're doing everything we can. We'll have to make those sacrifices later for sure. So again, we're going to continue to press through. School openings, for those of you that are parents on here or teachers, you understand this is a big deal. That's up to the state of Illinois. What I think is, you know, take it kind of day by day. We're going to have to take it based on regions, based on school districts, making sure that kids are social distancing, that they, you know, understand what that is. I'm sure I didn't know what social distancing was, and now I'm really sick of the term. And so making sure they follow through on that. And I think in some cases giving kids the option to be able to not go to school, especially if you have a parent at home that has real concerns. So the other thing is, of course, the stimulus payment. And so in this negotiation, that's one of the things that's being worked out is potentially another $1,200 check to Americans, and so hopefully we can get to a solution. There's a whole bunch of other things going on. I won't bore you with just the litany of stuff. You guys are very smart people. You see it. So what I want to do is get to questions. And again, *3. It's *3 if you want to ask a question. *3. And let me just do some quick business here for a second. When you ask your question, at some point, because how this program works, you'll be silenced because then you get taken out of the call queue. It's a whole thing. But if I don't respond to you and you're talking back or saying something, it's not because I'm ignoring you. It's just because that's how the system works. So the first question, the lucky first questioner, we're going to go to Belvedere, and I believe it's Robert. Robert, are you there?
Yes, it's Rob, by the way, but that's okay. It's all right. I watch you on Fox News, and you're very articulate and very you have a lot of good stuff to say. But anyway, my question is this, Congressman, with regards to the coronavirus package, to be very brief, it's I agree completely that I think that it shouldn't be too expensive because someone's going to eventually have to pay for that. Yeah. $3 trillion the other side wants to do. That's crazy. I mean, we just had a $3 trillion. I mean, how many trillions are we going to spend? and I don't understand that. I do want to get that stimulus, and I think the $300 maybe is normal, $250, whatever, get people back to work. But it doesn't make sense to spend on things that, make an excuse to spend money. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that was it.
Hey, thanks, Rob. I appreciate it, and thanks for being brave and being the first questioner. Look, I fully agree with you, and here's the difficulty. So now I think I'm starting this is my 11th year in Congress, which is crazy. Time flies. One of the things I look back at the battles that we had and, the government shutdowns and some of those things, and those shutdowns were over $50 billion, right? Which is a lot of money. I'm not shaking a stick at it, but compared to what we're seeing now, my goodness, right? We're just passing trillions and trillions. Now, I think it's necessary to do it, but I think we have to do it humbly and understand. When I voted for these packages, I wasn't excited about voting for them. I knew it was right. I believe it was right, but I know that we're spending money we don't have, and that my kids are going to have to pay this back. And, if they're lucky, they can start paying it back. So my bottom line is this, let's get through this. And then I think everybody, and this is an important thing to talk about, everybody needs to be prepared for some really difficult times ahead in some of those decisions. Doesn't mean your life's going to be terrible at all, but it just means we're going to have to make some sacrifices. State of Illinois, one of the biggest economies in the country, I think 6th largest economy now. We all know, great state, good people, a lot of manufacturing, massive debt and deficit. How does that happen, right? You have so many people here, you have all these jobs. It's because Illinois overspent and never made tough decisions. It is a lot easier. Look, if I voted for a $5 bajillion package, I would love to be able to do that because I could come to all of you at election time and say, vote for me, I just gave you each $1 million. But, of course, we know that's ludicrous. And so that's the kind of sobriety we need going into this. And so the tough decisions are going to be issues of real concern. When the economy comes back, we're going to need to talk about taxation. Are we all paying enough money in, even with a growing economy, that we're able to fix this? But at the same time, if you're going to talk about taxation, you have to talk about disciplining spending. Look, I'm 42 years old. I get Social Security at 67. Maybe for somebody like me, who presumably will have some money upon retirement, Actuarial tables say I'll live to be 100. Maybe you can delay that a little bit for me, but making sure you're preserving it for those that are in or near retirement or those that especially need it. It's not going to be fair, right? But it's going to be the right thing to do. So, yeah, I agree with you. And when the Democrats put up the $3 trillion bill, $3.5 trillion, it was a political move because now they can come to you and say, I voted for this. You like that, don't you? Yeah, I like that. Well, good job. I'm going to vote for you. The reality is, being in Congress and being in leadership in any way, you're going to have to make tough decisions or the chickens are going to come home to roost. So thank you. That was a long answer to your question, but thank you for the question. I really appreciate it. Again, if you want to ask a question, *3. We can get through as many as we can, but even if we can't get to you, we will give you an opportunity to leave a message at the end. So next we're going to go to Morris and Nathan. Nathan, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Not too bad. Thanks for taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. I have a question for you. So the new Exelon revelation about the lawsuit and settling and all that, I know you sent out a letter to everybody saying that we need to support nuclear power. Has your stance changed, and do you believe that there will be any clean energy bill passed in the state of Illinois, or has this tarnished the nuclear industry? Thank you.
Yeah, hey, thanks for the question. And, yeah, I mean, obviously the revelations are sobering. I think that's twice I've said sobering today. I don't usually even say that, but it was sad. It was there is some reality. ComEd, Exelon, parent company. There's some separation there a little bit. They're paying a massive fine. I think this should first off very much highlight corruption in Illinois when it comes to the government. We deserve better, and if these were all Republicans in Springfield, I guarantee you I would be saying the exact same thing. Illinoisans deserve fair leadership. Corruption should be the rare and sad exception, not something that we just grow to expect. When you have discussions about things like, we'll give you a project if you support my campaign. Maybe 100 years ago that was legal, maybe 50 years ago, I don't know. It is not legal today. And we know that's been going on for a very, very long time. We just deserve a lot better than that. We deserve people willing to make tough decisions, and we deserve people that aren't in this to enrich themselves personally. Nothing wrong with making money in politics, right? I get a salary in what I do. But your fight has to be for a bigger cause. You got to look at yourself at the end of your life, and I think there is no greater, besides being maybe a pastor or a priest, there's no higher calling than public service, of which you want to do the best you can with. So where I think it goes from here is it's really difficult to say. I think those obviously that have violated the law need to be held accountable. But man, if we shut down nuclear power in Illinois because of this, we're going to realize, unfortunately, too late, that was a massive mistake. As you know, living in Morris, nuclear power, people that make a ton of money there, it is clean. So if your concern is the environment, as mine is, you have zero carbon output and high baseload energy. Extremely, extremely important to a clean energy future, to jobs, as I mentioned, to just energy diversity and security. If you look in Germany, after the Fukushima disaster, Germany basically shut down its nuclear plants. And now it's realizing it made a huge mistake, although they won't admit it. And so they're having to build an oil pipeline from Russia called Nord Stream 2, of which I have been able to stop so far. I think that just goes to show, let's do this maturely. So, look, people need to be held accountable, but ultimately we have got to support nuclear energy in Illinois. 50% of energy that we use in Illinois is nuclear, 20% in the entire country, and so you see the nuclear powerhouse that we really are. So thank you for the question, and I hope you have a wonderful evening. Let's go next to Dwight and Michelle. How are you, Michelle?
I'm great, thank you. My question is, I understand that people need help right now, but instead of spending all this money to send money to everyone, I just would like to know what we're going to do to reopen our businesses and get people back to work. Because personally, I have been lucky enough to work through all of this, but I still got a stimulus check, which I donated to our local mission, but I didn't need that money, but yet that's adding onto this tax bill that my grandchildren are going to have to pay for.
Yeah. Thank you. On the stimulus check stuff, I fully agree. I mean, I didn't get one because my salary's higher than that threshold. But a lot of people did that have told me, look, I don't need it. The problem you run into, obviously, is how do you know who needs it, who doesn't? And I'll tell you, there were some groups that didn't get it, whether it was income or other situations. And, man, my office for weeks was taking calls of people that thought that was unfair. And I understand where they're coming from, but it's like ultimately, tough decisions have to be made in debt and deficit. Look, we went into this $21 trillion in debt. $21 trillion, right? When I got elected, it was we slowed it down for a little bit, but then they're called entitlements. That's the official word, mandatory spending. They just continue to grow. It's something Congress has no control over. 70% of what the federal government spends is not something I vote on. It's just automatic. Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, debt interest. And so if you think about that, these tough decisions have to be made. And we're going to come out of this now, I think, close to $32 trillion in debt if we're lucky. I mean, $10 trillion in a few months. I hear you. In terms of the business side of things, it is, and I believe it should be, a state-by-state and a locality decision. Where I've been critical of the governor in this situation is, to me the most important thing is public health, absolutely, right? But we need to recognize that public health and economy also go hand in hand. When it comes to, increases in suicide, all those kinds of things we know about medical issues, putting off, surgeries that lead to bigger problems down the road, all that has to be taken into account. And so you can't come at this country or even the whole state of Illinois with a one-size-fits-all. The city of Chicago is probably going to have far more restrictions than the town of Dwight, because Dwight, and frankly the vast majority of areas in my district, in our district, are already socially distanced, right? Most people don't live in high-rise apartments in Dwight unless there was one built that I didn't know about. And so absolutely we have to find that middle ground between getting the economy going, being safe. That's why I think wearing a mask around people is important, keeping your social distance. But I also think it's important to note, when this started, our fight wasn't to, keep away from each other so we never had the virus again. The fight is to flatten the curve, to make sure that the capacity is there as people get sick. So real quickly, and I'll go to the next question, imagine if there's 5 of you in a neighborhood, right? And you know that, for the most part, all of you are going to get this virus. And I'm a doctor. I'm the only doctor you have access to. And I have 1 ventilator, right? Now, let's say it's 10 people, okay? Makes the math easier. 5 people will be just fine. May not even know they have it. They'll have a cold. Now there's 5 people left. 2 will be very, very sick, right? But they won't need hospitalization. And let's say 2 or 3 do. Now, if I only have 1 ventilator and everybody gets sick at the same time, then 2 people are probably going to die. But if all those 3 people can spread out when they get the sickness, I have enough ventilators for everybody. So that's what we're trying to do. But I think people that, come out and say, boy, we have to shut everything down because there's the virus, yeah, there's a virus. It's probably going to be with us for the rest of our life. A vaccine will be great, treatments will be great, but I think it's going to end up being around like a cold. So thank you for your question. I think we need to do, the state government, it's not a federal decision, needs to do a better job of figuring out regions and regionalizing this. And secondarily, the federal side and state, we need to do a better job of testing. 350 million people in this country. That's a lot of tests. We've done a lot to spin up, but the faster we can get there, the better, especially when talk about things like school. Okay, next I'm going to go to Clifton, and I believe it's Alan. How are you, Alan?
I'm doing well.
Good. Thanks for taking some time.
The biggest question that I have is the school has emailed us over and over again and changed the schedule so many times this week alone. because things are up in the air, why aren't public schools mandated to just plain not be open in person for the first semester?
Well, thanks for the question. And, look, that's where I think, from the regional perspective, it's really important. If you have a surging virus in Florida, you got to take that into account. If you're, South Dakota and they don't have many cases, you shouldn't have to live under the thing of Florida. There's also the constitutional issue of the federal government, as far as I know, I may not be fully accurate in this, but really does not have the ability to come out and say that no school can open. That is the power that's granted to the states. We have the right over interstate commerce, so maybe universities and things, you can find a nexus. I think, continuing to grow e-learning and distance learning is good, but one of the issues that we've seen, and this brings the importance of broadband accessibility, whether it's in urban areas that can't afford broadband or rural areas where they don't have the infrastructure, is I think when the dust settles, we're going to look and realize that people that didn't have great access to the internet fell behind. Secondarily, what if you are in a home where mom's working, you don't know who your dad is, or your parents just aren't interested in teaching you? Sadly, we know that exists. So I think getting people back to school as safely but doing it the right way is important, of course, with public health being first. So it's not an area that I have control over, but I totally hear what you're saying. And I think seeing some of these schools doing things like an A-B schedule is good, but I wish I could say that there'll be an answer and it'll be consistent, but I'm sure you're going to probably continue to get more emails with changes. But thank you for taking the call, or thanks for being on the call with me, and appreciate it. We'll go next to Streeter. Mary. How are you, Mary? Mary and Streeter, you there? I hear you. Hello, Mary. Okay.
Hello?
Hey, you're on. You're live.
Okay.
Go ahead. What's your question? All right. Okay. We'll have to go on to the next one. So next we'll go to, it looks like we have maybe two people, and they are right near me, Warren and Doris in Manuka. Hello.
Hi, Adam. How are you?
I'm great. How are you?
We're doing wonderful over here in Untitled Township.
Love it.
Our question is the Speaker of the House, no wonder that a stalemate, how much money is she putting in for the city of Chicago to bail out all of their money problems, when in the state of Illinois there's 101 other counties that need help also? And is anybody really watching that?
That's a great question, so thank you. What is it? I think de Tocqueville said something like, the U.S. will endure until the leaders of the people realize that they can be bribed with their own money. But thank you for the question. Let me address that. So we sent the Republican members of Congress, and we tried to get every member of Congress in Illinois, but the Republicans were the only ones, shockingly, sent a letter to the governor basically asking where this federal money has gone. We've given quite a bit of money to the state of Illinois, as should be the case, when you have something like this. And the Inspector General put out a report that said only 18% or 15% of that money has been spent, and they're asking for more money. Let's think about the budget that they just passed. Initially, Governor Pritzker said that each department would need to plan for about a 20% cut in their department in order to make the budget work. What ended up happening? No cuts at all. In fact, I think spending increases, and they have a $10 billion budget shortfall that they're accounting for federal money to come into. Now, let's think of the other thing. We are just asking for an accountability from the governor of where this money has gone. Tell us, how much did Dixon get? How much did Ottawa get? Et cetera. No answer. Everybody's asked for that. No answer. So in rural areas, which all the 16th district is, are we getting our fair share in Illinois? You know, we would love to be able to put rules on that. The problem is most other states, which I guess is a good thing, they really don't have to worry about not getting their fair share because, you know, they have a state government that's accountable to that. Illinois, as we all know, doesn't. And you think about the crime in Chicago right now. You think about these budget shortfalls. We need more accountability. Like, I can scream it from the top of the roof. I can go on TV. I can, you know, write op-eds. But really it's going to take action by Illinois citizens. And I get it. It's a Democratic state, and a lot of people don't want to vote against, you know, Democrats or Republicans against Republicans. But at some point we've got to put that partisanship hat away and say, we just need a change, and we expect and deserve better. We all have gotten used to really high property taxes, I think, to an extent. I mean, we're not used to it, but I was talking to some of my friends in other states and asking them what they pay on property taxes, and I was blown away. You know, my property taxes a year are about $6,500 on my place. It's probably worth a couple $100,000. They have places that are worth $400,000 or $500,000 that they're paying $800,000 or $1,000 on. I mean, total. So we expect and deserve better, but that takes tough choices, and you know. Hopefully they can make a decision to make tough choices before they're forced to. But thank you for your question. Next, let's go to Ottawa. And Jill, how are you, Jill?
I'm good. How are you?
Pretty good, thanks.
I was just wondering, what are the mild symptoms of coronavirus?
Well, thanks for that. I think the bottom line is this, is there's no kind of roadmap that you're going to know. You know, if you have the flu, you can expect it's not going to be pretty. You generally know how you're going to feel. And that's kind of the case with COVID as well. But when it comes to mild symptoms, you know, you may have a runny nose. You know, you may ache a little bit. You may be pretty tired. It's those kinds of things. But what's actually kind of, in a way, scary, also good, is that a lot of people have no symptoms at all. And once we get to the point where I think this is better managed and under control, we're going to be able to get an idea of who all was infected, and I think we're going to be surprised. You know, I had to take the antibody test, and I wasn't infected because I thought I had it back in March. But there's a lot of people who never had any thought that they had it and come back that they did. So that's why things like the mask are important. You know, you're protecting others. Masks won't protect you, quite honestly. They may reduce the risk a little bit, but it's protecting other people from you, and there is evidence of that, as well as the distance. But the bottom line is, if you personally feel like you may have it, obviously go on the internet. I think look for the internet knows everything, right? But most importantly, call your doctor and call your physician. Let them know how you're feeling, and they'll decide whether or not you should get tested. And stay away from people if you think you may have it. Keep in mind, there's still other viruses running around this country, and in my case, March and even recently, I had what felt like it. It wasn't. So, you know, it'll continue to keep people guessing for a while, but it's something we have to take very seriously. Next, we're going to go to, again, I think everybody knows now, *3 if you want to ask a question. We'll be done here in probably about 15 minutes, and you'll be able to leave a message if you didn't get through to ask a question. We got a lot of people, thousands of people on the call, and a lot of people want to ask a question. So next we'll go to Seneca, and it's Brian. How are you, Brian?
I'm doing wonderful this afternoon, Adam. Let me see if I can phrase my question a little bit better than I did for your assistant in the background. This is about the unemployment insurance boost that recently went away and we're trying to partly put back in. The problems Republicans had, including myself, even though I've never qualified for this go-around, is that in some cases people were actually getting more in unemployment compensation than they were if they were working 40 hours a week at the job that laid them off. So understandably, a lot of those people didn't answer their call when they got called back by their boss because they couldn't afford to, because they were making more money sitting at home turning in resumes than they would have been if they actually went back to the kitchen of the restaurant or the grocery store or the construction site or the other critical job they got called back for. My concern is for this temporarily putting it back in, that we at least, we don't want to pay people more than they made on a 40-hour job, but we want to pay them as much or real close to as much, because if they go back to the normal unemployment where they don't get anywhere near as much, especially for single people, you've got people missing rent payments again, and then the landlords can't pay their mortgage and their property taxes because the tenant didn't pay their rent, so you've got evictions, foreclosures, stuff that we really don't want to be playing with even without a pandemic. So are we making progress towards getting most of the temporary boost back, meaning enough so that, people will go back to work when they're called, but they're not going to be shaking a coffee can on Michigan Avenue when they don't?
Yeah. Hey, thanks for that, Brian. I appreciate it. Let me address that, because I do think there'll be something along the lines of that boost. So if I had to guess, it'd be $400, $300. I don't know. It'll be something like that. They're also negotiating the time frame. When I got elected in 2010, there was basically unemployment was extended indefinitely because of the market collapse. And so Congress had made the decision before I got there that, unemployment basically won't run out on you. You'll be able to stay on it until that boost, that extension ended. The problem is we get there, the economy starts growing, it's time to end it, and the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, I remember this vividly, she on an interview said, Republicans are trying to literally take food out of the mouths of children, okay? Look, I can be critical of the things the President says, and I'll be critical of the things the Speaker says on that. We were not trying to take food out of the mouths of anybody. We just were getting back to where it should be, which is a temporary program to help you get by while you find another job or do what you need to do to be ready for that. This is another situation similar where obviously we're in a crisis, and I think that the benefit should be extended as long as this crisis continues. I think the boost is something to entertain because, as you mentioned, we don't want people, shaking cans on Michigan Avenue for money. But I think it's important to remind people, and maybe the slight reduction will do that, this is temporary because we cannot, typically when Washington votes for something, it's hard to take it away. And so it needs to be, I think, a moment-by-moment decision. What would be amazing is, and this is an argument for increasing the 21st centuryness of the federal government, right now we're still stuck in the 19th century in how we do business, is if we just knew how much money you made and we were able to match that. So somebody that is on unemployment is not making more money than they did at their job. The one final thing I'll say on that is, when we finally stopped that temporary extension of unemployment in around 2012 or 2013, within a couple months the unemployment rate dropped 1% because people went out and got their jobs back. I don't blame them for staying on unemployment if you make more money at it, right? But that's the issue. Secondarily and lastly, if your employer offers you your job back legally, you're supposed to take it or not accept unemployment. That said, that's up to the state to enforce, and Illinois obviously isn't. I don't think any other state is at this point. But thank you for that. It's really important. Let me go next to Rochelle. Rochelle, we'll go to Ken. How are you?
Adam, how are you? Thanks for taking my question.
You bet.
My question to you is this. How are people supposed to trust government and officials when they're sitting there having funerals for like John Lewis and George Floyd, packed with all these people, and yet we're not allowed to go to church, where there's a very easy chance to social distance, but yet when something like that happens with a politician, there's tons of people showing up to these things, and yet we're getting our First Amendment taken away from us with things like that.
Yep.
How do you feel about that, and what's your solution?
Well, thank you. What's the old saying? It's good for thee, or good for me, but not for thee. Look, here's the deal. There's a First Amendment, there is a Second Amendment, right? All these amendments that are extremely important that if we let one slip by, we start to lose the importance of the Constitution. The First Amendment states you have the right to protest, freedom of opinion, freedom of speech. You have a right to worship God. I'm a Christian, and I take my faith very seriously. I'm fine not being able to go to church when it started because we could go online, and thankfully we live in a moment where you can get those sermons online. But the time to be able to allow churches to open up is now. You cannot, on the one hand, and I think honestly, maybe some sociologists, when they go back and study this in 20 years, the real turning point of anger in this country started obviously with the George Floyd murder, rightfully so, and people started protesting, rightfully so. But what happened is then you think back to when in Springfield, for instance, there were people that showed up and protested the lockdown. I remember all over the place in Illinois, folks were saying, these people are killing people. There's 300 of them there or something. They're going to kill everybody. So it's like you can protest, but not if I don't agree with what you're saying. And so, look, these protests also, you have a right to speech. You don't have a right to violence. Peaceful assembly is just that. The second you burn down a building, the second you attack a police officer, the second you attack frozen water bottles, you are operating outside of the First Amendment, period, right? You could go out and march and carry a sign for even the most despicable thing you can think of. You could be a Nazi and go out and do that, and you're protected under the First Amendment. But what that Nazi protester to inflict violence on somebody or to torch somebody's property, you are outside of the First Amendment, and you need to be held accountable. And so be consistent. If you're going to have the right to protest, you have the right to worship God, and you have the right to exercise your faith. You do not have the right to be violent in protest. I will tell you, I got activated, as some of you know, for the riots in Minneapolis. The second I got up to Minneapolis, the rioting stopped and it went back to peaceful protests. Literally the day, because the National Guard showed up. And some people bristle at the National Guard because it's intimidating. Well, the National Guard in these cases are designed to be intimidating because you don't have a right to burn down somebody else's building because you're upset. You have a right to vote. You have a responsibility to vote. You have a right to have your voice heard. You have a right to be angry. You don't have a right then to march into somebody's property, loot it, and burn it, period. The fact that there is any politician defending this, and frighteningly there's a lot of them, I think politically it'll come back to bite them, but I think is absolutely wrong. So thank you for your question. I went off on a tirade, but I really appreciate you doing that. Next, I'm going to go to Loves Park. Ben or Benjamin?
Hi, Congressman. Thank you for taking my question. So my question is with regards to the possibility in the November election that we may vote by in-mail ballots. And I know President Trump has been against that, but I want to see, are you in favor of that? And if so, would you be willing to provide extra funding for that so that it's regulated and the process happens in a speedy fashion?
You bet. Thanks. Thanks for the question. First off, how elections are done it's a state-by-state issue. The federal government's responsibility is to make sure that, in essence, your vote counts and that everybody has a right to be heard. That's, in essence, the federal role. And then we can provide funding to make sure, whether it's election security, Russian intrusion, Chinese intrusion, domestic actors, stuff like that. The mail-in balloting thing, and it hasn't been explained well by the president or, frankly, anybody, the media especially. Mail-in balloting is very different than absentee ballots. So in Illinois, you've, at least, since I started voting, you could request an absentee ballot sent to your house. You guys know this. You can vote, send it in. What mail-in voting is saying we're going to send every registered voter a ballot. Even if you don't want to vote, you may be registered to vote, and you just say, I'm not going to vote, and you're going to get a ballot. Now, that's where it starts to get dangerous, right? Because you now have the potential for voter fraud, but even if there's no voter fraud, okay, so there's not even one single vote cast that's fraudulent, Well, look at what's happening in New York right now. There's a congressional race that is still up in the air from like a month ago because there were 13 or 14,000 mail-in ballots that were sent. And now they are litigating massively whether some of those ballots shouldn't be counted. Think of the hanging chad issue in Florida. Now imagine that here. Some of these ballots had no postmark on them, so in theory, Carol Maloney is the incumbent that's in danger here. In theory, she could have, come out behind on Election Day, and then people could have said, "Oh crap, I forgot to vote." Fill out their ballot and send it in. That would be illegal because it's past the election moment. Some of them have postmarks that were sent late. And so they shouldn't be counted, but they're litigating that. So what's going to happen, and I do fear this, honestly, this has nothing to do in my mind with what the outcome of the election is, okay? I think the highest calling to me is making sure that people have faith that their vote is going to count and that their voice is heard. That is the only thing that makes a republic or democracy actually work. That's the only thing, right? You may hate your congressman. I hope you don't, but you might. But you have a right every 2 years to vote for or against me. That's where your voice is heard. So my concern is, if you think of Florida and the closeness of that, imagine now 50 states with these, postmarked ballot issues. We're definitely not going to know who the president is on election night. We're going to be lucky, and I'm not joking, to know who the president is at the inauguration, because you are going to have, you think people are fired up now, wait till it becomes a legal battle, not just in one state, 2 states, maybe 5 states, all these different districts. That's the concern. So it's not, I think everybody needs to have a right to vote. So if the best way for you to do it is an absentee ballot, do it. I may vote absentee. I usually vote early. But to say, to put this up, I'm very concerned. That said, if it's done, I would provide whatever funding necessary to make sure that it works out. Because as divided as we are, the last thing in the world we need right now is another, Florida hanging chad issue times 10. So thank you for that. I'm going to take one more question. Let me just say again, stay on the line because when it's over, you're going to have it's like an answer machine. You can leave a message, ask a question, and we'll get back to you. Let me go next and lastly, saving the best for last, to Ottawa, and it's Alice. Hey, Alice.
Hi. I'm all right. Thanks for doing this.
Mm-hmm.
I know that you are in support of, obviously, the police and how important they are in our communities, and I know that you've said you're against defunding the police. I think it's important to understand that that movement isn't about defunding and abolishing the police. It's about redirecting funds to different things that are important in our community, like mental health services, social services. So I understand you have said that we need those huge police budgets to get good salaries for police officers, so good people are police officers. But that makes me question how you feel about educators being some of the least well-paid people in the country. How does that work? How are educators so poorly paid, but also seem to be great people? And 2, what do you suggest we should actually do to fight racial injustice in the country, if not consider different ways to look at police systems?
Yep. Great. Hey, thank you. So I'll try to address all of that as I remember your questions. So first off, teachers. My mom's a teacher. She's a retired teacher. Obviously, I would love to be able to pay every teacher, $500,000 a year, because I think what they do is amazing. I think in Illinois, even though the pension's unfunded, that's what I'm very concerned with, because there's going to be a day Illinois can't print money, unlike the federal government. There's going to be a day people wake up and they're not going to be able to get their pension payment, and that's a big concern to me. So yes, I'd love to pay teachers more. It's up to school districts. They make the decisions. They decide what they can afford, what they pay. You put that up with infrastructure, education costs, etc. In terms of racial injustice and defunding the police. So on the defunding the police side, I quite honestly think, if you look at some of the early discussion about defunding the police, if you look in Minneapolis, for instance, they weren't talking about redirecting funding. They were talking about getting rid of funding for the police and having a whole different kind of force. There's one town that is doing now, cops don't do traffic stops. They have an unarmed citizen brigade, something. Traffic stops, any police officer will tell you, are one of the more dangerous things they'll ever do. So that won't last long because, unfortunately, they'll learn the hard way. I think law and order is extremely important, not because it's a campaign slogan, but because everybody has the right to be safe so that you can be heard and you can protest. And I also agree in looking at these budgets for things like mental health and spending what we need to spend to make sure we're achieving that, but not at the cost of law enforcement. If there's ways to adjust a budget to spend it better, that's a police board's decision, and I'd be all in favor of it. We also have to keep in mind that, as you mentioned, I have mentioned before, we need good cops, right? Most police officers are great people. There's bad police officers. There's bad, I'm an Air Force pilot. There's bad Air Force pilots. There's bad congressmen, as we all know. There's bad in everything. There's bad ministers. The key is to make sure that we're doing the best we can, not just to weed out the bad recruits, but to give people the training they need in things like de-escalation. The answer to that is not to take away their budgets. If you're going to cut pay, which you inevitably would have to do, how in the world are you going to get somebody that may have a good college education that's going to look at that and say, I'd love to be a police officer, but you're going to pay me that much, and I could go make this much here. It's the same issue we deal with teachers. So I think defunding the police is, I respect your opinion. I think it's a completely non-starter in my mind. A racial injustice. I could go through all the litany of stuff that we all hear all the time. I'm not going to bore you with that, right? We need to make sure people are treated fairly. We did criminal justice reform. That is one of the biggest accomplishments, I think. I was proud to vote for it. But here's the problem with society right now. First off, this country, compared to most, if not the vast majority of countries in the world, is among the least racist countries. The fact that we're having this conversation about racial injustice shows the fact that we are one of the least racist countries. If you look at places like China, where they have concentration camps for Muslims right now, and you look all over the place. Is there better countries for racial justice? Yeah. But I think it's important to look at the gains we've made. And secondarily, here's the other problem. Every day I go on the internet or watch the news, there's somebody whose words were taken out of context and it's spun as racism, okay? If I put a tweet up, by the way, I don't look at Twitter much, but I guarantee that there's going to be 47 comments underneath saying that I'm a racist or a fascist, and it could be about National Puppy Day. What that does, I don't care about, people attacking me. I've been in this business for a while. But what it does is it chills the ability to have a conversation. One of the most important things that we can do is to take, for instance, a black man and a white man, sit them down, and have them explain to each other what their fears are. The reason conflict exists is because when fears collide, there is conflict. What is it that an African American is afraid of at the depth, not getting arrested by the police, but the depth of it? What is it that you're at the core of your soul that you're afraid of? What is it that a white person is afraid of at the core of their soul? It changes for everybody. But until we can feel free to talk about that, I always have to be careful how I talk about this, because I'm like, if I say one thing that can be taken out of context, I'll make national news and everybody will call me a racist, and I'm not a racist. We cannot have the fear to have this discussion anymore. We have to be open about it. People that are white have to be able to say what their fear is, what their concerns are, and of course people of any other ethnicity have to be able to say what their fear and concerns are. And the more we try to put ourselves into a corner for political points on the left or right, the worse this is going to get. So my view is there's a ton of programs we could do. There's a ton of, right? We know what those are. Let's do it. Education, stuff like that. But let's quit attacking each other and looking for ways to call people racist on the left or right. Let's open up and be able to have a discussion about our fears, anxieties, and then I guarantee you, if you had a 1-hour conversation with somebody of a different race, by the time that was done, you guys would hug and be best friends. Guaranteed. So thank you for that question. I'm glad I had the opportunity to chat about this. I think it's important. Let me say it's the end of the call, but stay on the line. You'll have an opportunity to leave a message. I want to say quickly what an honor it is to be able to represent you. It's, job, there's some days you wake up and you're like, oh, what am I doing? It's tough. But every day I realize, it is a middle-class kid from Bloomington, Illinois is representing 730,000 people. Thank you for the honor and the opportunity to do it. And God bless you all. I hope you have a wonderful week. Thanks a lot.